Saxon Algebra 2, welcome to my winter midterm review. I know some students say, why do you call it the winter midterm when it's actually finally spring? It's because it's a midterm over the material that we covered in the winter. So that's why I call it that. I don't know, that's just how my brain thinks of it. So don't let that confuse you. It's the March midterm, maybe that's a better name for it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to list the 13, 14, 15 or so most recent lessons we've studied. I'm going to give you a description. I'm going to either refer you to your notes to find the formulas and things, or I'm going to summarize them here, depending on how big they are. And we'll go through in reverse order what you need to study. Remember that I start with the most recently taught lesson and go backwards, and I don't necessarily test on what we covered, the second week of January, because the way John lays out his lessons, we're baby stepping, right? Always toward more complicated calculations. So I don't need to go back and test you on what we did the first week of January, because that's probably included in a more complicated step in one of the more recent lessons. So if we test on the most recent material, we'll cover all the old stuff too. All right, make sure you copy with me. Lesson 96 is our most recent lesson. That was about joint and combined variations. And we had a chart. I did a chart in the notes to that lesson that reminded you of the different formulas. We had the inverse and the direct variations, and then we have a constant method and a proportion method. So go back and look at your lesson notes to find that chart. It's too big to squeeze in here. All right, also in lesson 96, we had irrational roots of nonlinear systems. They were systems of equations that gave us crazy, fussy answers. Do you remember? It was with this one. There's no formulas necessarily to that. You just have to hash through the details of those intricate numbers. More nonlinear systems. Remember that you don't have to really understand graphs and parabolas and circles and that sort of thing. John will tell you. And if I have a problem like this on the test, I will tell you what shape they make. So that will help you figure out how many answers you should have. I'll give you that information. 94. Functions. Well, we reviewed everything we've learned about functions in past years, and we got some new stuff. If I were to test on this lesson, the problem that I would choose would be like example 94.3, which is the problem where you're actually entering values into a function and calculating it. If f of x equals x squared plus 1, find the f of 3, right? So you plug 3 in. So that specifically is what I would want you to study. 93 is the discriminant. Remember that the discriminant itself is b squared minus 4ac, right? It's what's inside the pig house of the man-eating dragon. And then you have to remember, I want you also to remember this, if the discriminant equals 0, if the discriminant is greater than 0, if the discriminant is less than 0. And then you have to remember the rest, right? And again, see the notes. Okay, see lesson notes. Okay, you have it all in there. Just make sure you have that all memorized. 92, boat in the river. Oh, you know how I love them, right? I just see Lewis and Clark. I mean, I see them standing up in the canoes, but that's probably not right. But you know, they're loaded up with their goods and they're paddling madly up the river. It's just so exciting. Remember these equations. This is the downstream, which we know by the D's there, but this is the downstream equation. And then this is the upstream equation. It's where you subtract. All right, so there are those again. You know I love it. Not saying anymore. 91. Systems of linear inequalities. This is where you graph the two lines and then you shade the inequality region and then you look for where the two areas overlap, right? It's where you use the colors and the lines and you shade things in. These are pretty fun. I like these. There's nothing special you really need to know about them. Oh, I'm sorry, see, I always do this. I'm going in decreasing order, but then every once in a while my brain just wants to go in the normal order. That's a 0. Systems of 3 equations. This is where we have an X and a Y and a Z. And we usually do something crazy like eliminate twice. And remember that for these, we want to show the answer as an ordered triple, right? So that would be like 1, 2, 3, something like that, all right? 89. Let me go to the top of the next page for 89. I don't want to run out of space. Let's see, this is the lesson. This is the description. '89 is about conjunctions and disjunctions. So graphing on a number line. Remember that if we're graphing integers, I put 2 I's at the beginning. I can't explain that. When we're graphing integers, we make dots like so, right? And when we're graphing the reals, then we circle and draw. These aren't necessarily the same answer. I'm just giving 2 examples. Remember that with the reals, if it's just greater than or less than, we put an open circle on the number. If it's greater than equal to, less than equal to, then we color it in. This I call an open circle. And this I call a shaded dot. Okay? And then you have to think carefully, do I want to include the number? Do I want to include the number? Do I want to not include the number? And with integers, it's on or off, right? You either include it or you don't, depending on whether there's an equal sign or not. With the reals, the picture changes, right? You use either the open circle or the shaded dot. 88. Products of chords and secants. This is when we're multiplying the line segments, okay? It's the segments, not the angles. Sometimes we talk about how to find the angles on circles with chords and sequence. But this is when we're focusing on the segments, not the angles. And I want you to look at the lesson notes. for all the details on that. It's too much to recap here. Also well, let's see, this was also 89, sorry. This one is 88. This is distance formula. There are, in fact, several different ways to write the distance formula. This is the version I suggest you memorize, and I'll tell you why once I write it down. These two sections look exactly like the numerator and the denominator in our slope formula, right? M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I like to use this format because it looks the most like that slope formula, and that makes it easier to remember a new thing. Lesson 88 also is this guy. PV equals nRT. Remember, this is a chemistry calculation that involves pressure, volume, number of moles. R is some constant, T is temperature. You don't need to know the science. You just need to know that John will give us 4 of the 5 and ask us to solve. And the trick to these is to rearrange the letters first. Right? So figure out which one you need to solve for. Let's say volume. Then you would divide P so that you just have V by itself. Then fill in the numbers and simplify. So that's my hint to you on that one. 87. Okay, we were just talking about this guy. Slope formula. And we've used this before. But if you want to calculate a slope, you can squint at the diagram and count the little squares. It works. It annoys the heck out of me though. I would rather take the 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, and use this formula to calculate the slope formula. And this is one I was talking about that looks see the numerator is there, the denominator is there. And that makes it a lot easier to memorize this one if you use the form that's similar to this. There are different ways to rearrange these. So it looks different, but it works the same. But I don't want to talk about those. I just want you to know this formula, this version of it. Okay, that's what you need to know. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, that's 13 lessons. I'm going to pull 10 problems from that. Study them all, make sure you can do all of these lessons, and you'll be in great shape. Let me tell you a little bit more about how to study. I'm going to give you what seems like a very obvious, but is actually quite profound piece of advice. Do actual problems. The best way to prepare for a test is to practice doing whatever it is that you're going to have to do on the test. If you're going to have to answer true-false questions, then practice answering true-false questions. If you're going to have to do cartwheels and backwards round-offs, then you better practice cartwheels and backward round-offs. If you're going to have to do algebra problems, do actual problems. I have had quite a few students, and the reason I stress this is because in the past I have had students who don't do well on the test and they're really shocked, and I'll say, okay, tell me about how you studied, and they'll say, well, I looked through the book and I looked at all the lessons and I understood them all, so I thought I would be fine. I'm like, did you actually work problems? And they said, no, I just looked at the lessons and made sure I knew how to do them. I'm like, I mean, that's great, but you have to actually do the problems so that you are testing yourself on, you're practicing for the actual event of the test. So which problem should you do? Here's my advice. Advice. Work. You know those 13 lessons I just gave you, or 13 sections, because some of them are from the same lesson. Go back and work all the examples in the textbook for those lessons. The reason why I like you to work the examples is because if you don't get them right, the examples give the most detailed explanation as to what you're doing. And they're also what I explained in the videos, so that if you are a little confused, there's the best likelihood of you getting a good explanation. All right, if you work all of those and you still would like to work some more problems, then what I suggest you do, secondly, is work the practice problems for each of the lessons I've laid out to you. And the reason I recommend that is because they're organized right by the lessons, right? They're easy to find. You know they relate to the problem. You don't have to squint at the little numbers in the parentheses. It's just easier. So you can do whatever problems you want. I just recommend this because it's the easiest way to do it. If you have questions, and I'm going to write this really big, if you have any questions, please, please, please message me. You will not annoy me. You will not frustrate me because I'm super busy with all the really important things I do in my life besides teach math. I love when my students reach out to me. I love to help them. Please do not be shy. Message me anytime. And that goes for not only my local students, but if you are a YouTube student, you can reach out to me anytime you want. My email is in my About page. If you reach out to me by email, but you want to talk, more than just to say hi, then I'll give you my cell number and we can text. I can send you pictures. I can make you private videos. I'm doing all of those things for YouTube students who don't otherwise know me or work with me. So please don't be shy. If you have any questions at all, even if you're not taking the test, ask me anytime. All right. You will have 24 hours to take the test. What I recommend that you do is study before, but make your last study session within 24 hours of when you take the test. What I mean by that is, don't study on Monday, then ignore math for Tuesday and Wednesday, then pick up the test Thursday afternoon or Thursday morning and say, okay, I think I'll do this now. You studied multiple days ago. That's not going to be fresh in your mind. So study on Monday, maybe a little bit on Tuesday, and then Wednesday night before you go to bed, maybe look through your formulas again, work one or two of the problems that have been dogging you the most. You know what I mean? Don't save all your studying for the last 24 hours, but just check in one last time and kind of freshen it all up in your mind. I am not a believer in cramming. Don't put off studying for the night before. I mean, you can, it happens, but that is not the best way to learn, and you're just going to drive yourself crazy. Make sure you're well rested before you take the test. And remember, the test, I will drop it off between 12 and 1 on Wednesday, and then I'll pick it back up between 2 and 3, something like that, on Thursday. So that gives you plenty of time. Make sure you're well rested. Make sure you have had something good to eat. Make sure that you're drinking. Make sure that you're in a place where you feel comfortable working it. It doesn't have to be pin drop silence unless that's how you like it. So just work in a place where you feel comfortable. And then the last thing that I want you to always remember to think about is make a plan to control test anxiety. Everybody gets some test anxiety, and a little is fine. It actually motivates us. It kind of gets us up on the edge of our seat and helps us kind of bring our A game, right? It's like a heightened, it's like a battle reflex, honestly. I hate to say that, but it's true. So a little text anxiety is good. Too much can be crippling and it can keep you from doing your best work. If you have any test anxiety, I didn't get test anxiety in high school, but once I went to college and the stakes were a little higher, I would get a little stressed out. And I found that when I left my dorm and walked to the building where the test was, it was usually fairly far. I went to school at Michigan State University, which has a really big campus. And so at least it would be 10 minutes of walking outside, and I would get to the building where my test was, and I'd be like, oh, I feel so much better than I did when I left my dorm. Just that walk outside was all I needed to control my test anxiety. So that's my number one recommendation, is to go for a walk before you sit down and take the test sometime in this time frame. All right, that's what I've got for you. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me if there's anything I can do for you, and I wish you the best of luck.